All right, let's get started. Welcome to Proactive Data Management, how to take charge of your school's data and prepare for the future. We're so excited to have you joining us today. As you are entering the Zoom room, please introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us your name, organization, and where you're joining us from today. And we will get started. So this is our agenda for today. I'm going to open us up with a welcome and introduction, and then I'm going to pass things over to my colleague, Elise Hawthorne, to frame the webinar, followed by Diego Patterson with the research and findings, some proactive approach stories from the Loudoun County Public Schools team. We'll do some question and answer, and finally end with a thank you and some next steps. As we go through the presentation today, please, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat or in the Q&A section in the Zoom webinar, and we will be monitoring those throughout the webinar. We will make sure to address those questions either during the presentation or during the Q&A session towards the end. So please ask any questions you have during the session today. I'm Jonathan Barry Wolf. I'm a member of the marketing and communications team at Project Unicorn. I have the pleasure of being able to work on these webinars and to partner with some incredible folks on these programs. So big thank you to our friends at MicroStrategy and Loudoun County Public Schools for joining us today. Few items I want to hit first before we get started. Please, if you haven't already, sign the Project Unicorn pledge. We have a pledge specifically for school district tech leaders and for ed tech vendors. Signing the pledge indicates your dedication to data interoperability implementation. Signing the pledge gets you access to webinars like these, resources and other programs, and technical assistance from Project Unicorn as you embark on your data interoperability journey. It's free to sign, so please sign up. The links for this and everything I'm going to be talking about will be in the chat, and we will follow up with these links afterwards as well. Went a little too far there. Here we go. If you are an EdTech vendor here today, apply for the Project Unicorn Interoperability certification. The certification is offered in partnership with Digital Promise. Basically, you complete a form, and then the data interoperability of your tool is ranked from tier 1 to tier 4. You'll receive a really cool badge like the one you see on the screen, which you can display anywhere you would like. You will also receive some one-on-one technical assistance from Project Unicorn experts and how to raise that ranking in your product. It's free for all Project Unicorn signatories, so sign the pledge and then check out this incredible program. And now I'm going to pass things over to my colleague, Elise Hawthorne, who's going to frame the webinar for us today. Elise?
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Jonathan. I'm Elise Hawthorne. I'm technical support and implementation lead with Project Unicorn. And we wanted to start off the webinar today by talking about the relationship between data interoperability and proactive data management, and how great data management practices really allow for interoperability. So at Project Unicorn, we're all about data interoperability. And one of the topics that we talk about with school systems and vendors that we work with is how important data management is, and how understanding what data you have, how it's stored, where it's managed, and how it's used is really foundational to building and leveraging interoperable data systems. Effective data practices ensure that an organization's data have the same meaning, measure, and quality in all systems. And it really goes back to the phrase, avoiding garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have strong data going into your systems, you're not going to be able to create strong and meaningful insights out of that data. So moving on to our next slide, good data management practices really allow for gains in efficiency, as well as how students are served. And good data management practices allow for interoperability. So at Project Unicorn, we define interoperability as the seamless, secure, and controlled exchange of data between applications. And at the core of interoperability is a focus on better informing instruction and driving student-centered learning experiences. And interoperability is really a concept that we know from everyday life. For instance, if you withdraw money from an ATM from a bank that is different than the bank you usually go to, that is enabled by interoperability. And in schools, it means gains like teachers not having to enter the same information in multiple applications, or district teams not having to do manual data imports and exports. So moving on to our next slide, pursuing interoperability can seem like a big challenge, but luckily there are some great resources out there that we want to highlight. At Project Unicorn, we work with education data standards to help promote interoperability. And these standards set a common language for interoperable systems. They're really the backbones of interoperability. They include IMS Global, EdFi, A4L, and the Common Education Data Standards. Each of these organizations are great partners for us at Project Unicorn, and they all offer resources and information about interoperability that are built on these data standards. In addition to that, moving on to our next slide, we're also very lucky in that we work with great organizations that share resources around interoperability. Our partners at COSIN have a great interoperability maturity model that shows how far along organizations are in pursuing data interoperability. And at Project Unicorn, we also offer our school system data survey, which is a free tool that's available to help measure your organization's level of interoperability and determine next steps on your path. So now that we've given a high-level overview of the connection between interoperability and data management practices and some of the great resources that are out there, I'm going to hand it over to our panelists to dive deeper into this topic. And we're very lucky to be joined today by Diego Patterson of MicroStrategy and Rachel Johnson and Kara Bain of Loudoun County Public Schools. So Diego's going to walk us through an approach to data management practices, and Rachel and Kara are going to describe how they've enabled proactive data management in their district. So I'm going to hand it over to Diego.
Thank you, Elise. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's we're happy to support the great work that you're doing at Project Unicorn and across the Innovate EDU organization. My name is Diego Patterson. I'm with MicroStrategy, and we are a technology and services company that is focused on data and analytics solutions. So our vision as a company is to bring intelligence and insights to every decision maker across the entire organization. My team is specifically focused on local government and the education space, and we've helped districts already address several specific data management challenges. Arlington County Public Schools, Prince George's, Riverside County Office of Education are all examples of organizations that have come to us with specific challenges that we've helped them address. And what we see is that organizations across the board, from public, private sector, nonprofit, et cetera, they are responding and reacting to urgent requirements and solving them one at a time. What we want to advocate for is a more holistic approach to become proactive versus reactive, right? Because what can result from a one at a time approach is that there are many siloed solutions across the organization that creates new data sources that are disconnected. And when the data sources are disconnected, the organization needs even more solutions to bridge gaps, and the cycle begins that can be really tough to manage. So you might solve one problem, right, but then create one or two more. And so what I'd like to talk about today is an approach that we practice at MicroStrategy and that we promote across our customers to help organizations, again, become more proactive. And that's a process of assessing the current state, benchmarking, and then prioritizing data management projects in order to become more proactive. Let's see here. Okay, so I'll first start with the assessment process, right? What we want to do is listen. We want to hear from everybody across the whole organization and recognize that every organization is unique. And every stakeholder's input is really important, and everyone's voice matters to build a roadmap that's going to be successful. So that's our first step. We want to listen. We want to hear from teachers. We want to hear from counselors, even from students and parents. And we'll ask questions directly in a one-on-one interview format about how they use data and what decisions they're making based off of their personal experience, what are gut decisions, what decisions they use data to be more informed on, where there are frustrations, risks, and ultimately where there are opportunities to innovate. And it's important, again, to gather that from all the stakeholders across the board. And we're listening through these basic 4 lenses here. There's the people aspect, there's a process-oriented aspect, there's the product or the technology. Happy Technology Day, by the way. And then your pipeline of data, right? You can have excellent processes, you can have the most sophisticated technology. If the data isn't there, or if the people aren't skilled in a certain way to take advantage of that technology and data, there are roadblocks. And so we will listen, and then our process is to report back our findings to the organization through those 4 lenses. And based on MicroStrategy's experience with 4,000 customers across the globe, we've seen every different kind of analytics program, and we can help somewhat benchmark an organization from what we call a analytics maturity curve. So we report our findings, we provide recommendations based off of that experience of working with those other customers, and those other customers represent a very wide spectrum of maturity. And we want to understand the honest current state of the data management through the lenses of those 4 Ps. Now, it's important, if you can get to this stage, it has significant value all on its own, because it is possible for an organization to descend on this curve. If enough time passes and the data volume increases and the wrong solution gets implemented, it's possible to move from a strategic state down to a tactical or exploratory state. So knowing where you are in this curve and having alignment across those different stakeholders of where you are in a really honest way is a fantastic first step that we really take the opportunity to help people get to. Now, the next outcome from our exercise is to assign a level of value to each analytics project as it relates to key initiatives in the organization. What are the major risks, and where do we see the most opportunity for innovation? So that's one measure that's really important. And the other measure that's somewhat more difficult in a lot of cases to measure is the level of effort to achieve that project. And we want our customers to feel empowered with both of those measures, because as you're walking through the process of creating your project plan, it's critical to be able to find the quick wins, the low-hanging fruit, to build momentum and eventually develop the kind of credibility that you need to take on and tackle some of those larger, bigger projects. And what ultimately we're all working toward is a long-term plan where everyone can be aligned on what projects relate to people, what projects relate to processes, technology, data, again, what the level of effort is from a cost perspective, from a time perspective, and again, having alignment from the leadership team through the analysts and technology organization, and incorporating feedback from the end users, the beneficiaries of those solutions, so that you're moving in the right direction. And to keep in mind that it is a journey and it's unique to everyone. There's lots of assessments out there. So make sure that the ones that you select and the vendors that you engage with are really customizing the approach to meet the needs of your district. So with that, I'll hand it off to Rachel and Kara to give their true life story of going through their own journey. And it's very exciting. Thank you so much for allowing me to present. And please reach out if you have any questions.
Thank you, Diego. I am going to start here. So we are entering our 3rd year of having an established data science practice in Loudoun County Public Schools. And the way that we got here is a long and winding road. We dipped our toes into OBIEE as an analytics tool back in the mid 2000s, and we suffered from very low adoption and very high costs. So we tried to find other ways to corral the data management practices and services in Loudoun County Public Schools, and it did take us a 10-year journey until we were finally able to establish this lane within the division under the Department of Digital Innovation. So while it resides in technology, our journey involves teams and subject matter experts from every avenue within the school district. So this is really our story, right? Just as everybody else experiences, people have different definitions for data, and then they keep their own data sets that they trust. We had to spend an arduous amount of effort in order to make sense of the varying data sets just to answer simple questions. A simple question could be, how many full-time employees do you have today? And that's a simple question, but there are complicated answers, which leads me to the third bullet. Depending on who you ask, that information might be as of a specific date. It may be at specific categories of employees, even though we specify full-time employees. So you can see how just a very innocent question can turn sticky because of these exact bullets. So at the bottom, you'll see that data as a service was our innovation trigger internally to solving these challenges. We finally reached the point where we no longer had the capacity to manage the data and manage the responses to the questions that were coming in. So we had to create a distributed model. And the way that we did that was to establish a data team. And with that, I will turn over the slide deck to Kara to talk about the data science practice.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Rachel. I'm Kara Bain. I am the supervisor of our data science and digital solutions teams here at LCPS in Northern Virginia. It's great to be here today. I love how everybody keeps saying this word journey. I think it's just so spot on to this work. So this slide is really, it's talking about how did we get here. So a few years ago at LCPS, we documented our data science goals, which you can see here. In order to realize these goals that support our vision, we needed to establish an overall data management strategy that touched on each of the areas in the graphic. And this is what's really been leading us to this proactive data management. So we realized at the time that we needed dedicated resources for many of these areas so that we wouldn't lose our focus, because this was such a big goal. This was our vision. We really wanted to get here. And as Rachel mentioned, this has been a long time coming. It's really been a journey. It's really been an evolution. So as a first step, what we did here at LCPS was we took existing positions and we established our core data science team. It was a small team at first. We've since grown, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But that was really our first step, was establishing our data science team. And then Rachel just mentioned this as well, but as our next step, we created a cross-functional data team. So our data team, it includes representatives from every business line in LCPS, and we meet monthly to discuss things like data governance, to discuss new asks for information that we're hearing across LCPS, and to discuss how best to respond to those asks, either through something that we already have, or maybe it's something that we now need to build because this is a need that we're starting to hear over and over again. So our journey has been interesting. It's definitely been an evolution and one that we're still evolving. This is a slide that we put together a year or so ago, and we've really made some good progress here on our evolution. One of the things that I think has led to our success has been bringing on an analytics tool alongside the creation of our data team. So we use a tool called Qlik as our analytics tool. It's QLIK, which you'll see as we move through our slides here as well. In the early days, we built some small data models that focused on the core student data. And we began to use those data models to get data out there to our staff and to our users. We began to publish visualizations in Qlik, and really wanted to get this into the hands of our users. At this point, we were in the crawl phase. So we were defining our tool, we were identifying our questions, we were determining what data we needed, and we were beginning to talk about data governance. Over the next year, we entered the walk phase. So as Click was gaining a user base, people started to proactively ask about Click and ask about trying to get more data to answer their questions. They were starting to move away from what we call here data walls, where different staff across our schools were manually collecting data themselves, trying to piece it all together themselves, and trying to keep that updated. And we were slowly pushing away from these data walls into this tool, this BI tool, to make everybody's work easier. We also began to just apply Click into real-time discussions to either show information as the questions were being raised, or to apply to these discussions. We can build that, we can show you that, and then to go back and build these pretty quick Click apps because we already had these data sources, to then put that into the discussion very quickly so that people could start to use information to make decisions. So with these new questions, we began to enhance our data models. We added to our data governance discussions, and we also were getting stronger in our data security practices. Now we're in the run phase of this. So we've built along the way some quite strong data management practices. We have about 115 Click apps that we've published out there for users for self-service to be able to get information that they need. We have some citizen Click creators out there who are building their own Click apps using data that we've made available. And we have a lot of information just being put out there that people are really ingesting and starting to use and ask more questions. So now that we have this strong data management foundation, we're really turning our focus to data literacy. This is something that we've been working on and discussing throughout our evolution. But this year, we've really made it a big focus, where we've actually brought on consultants to help staff interpret data, to build better visualizations, and ultimately to better engage with the information that they're seeing in order to take those next steps that they want to take. So we've done a lot of work, but there's definitely more to do to reach our goals. Here's a quick look at where we are and how our data foundation is set up for some of our more technical friends on the call who want to see how our data flow looks and what our data management practice looks like. You can see at the top here are touchstones at the top of the slide. These are always in the back of our minds as we move forward. What you'll see here is this is our current state. So we have Synergy as our student information system, and we have a lot of data sources across assessment vendors and across other vendors that we partner with as well, that we are bringing into our analytics repository, currently either via EdFi, through an operational data store, or through just some general ETL practices. Our analytics repository is our governed data source right now. This is the data repository that we're continuing to grow. We have data coming in, like I was saying, from our student information system, from our assessment vendors, from other sources, even from our Oracle HR data system now. And from there, we're using Click as our BI tool to be able to build these visualizations for staff to be able to get information that they need. This slide here is depicting our long-term vision. So we have now a pretty strong practice set up where we are moving data from multiple sources into a governed data repository and building visualizations, but we'd like to do more. So this vision, it's continuing to evolve as we work with EdFi and our other partners on how we can continue to improve interoperability and to strengthen our overall foundation. But some things that are top of mind that I'll point out on this slide are, we really want to grow our data pipeline, continue to build our governed data repository, and we want to build a repository that can be leveraged for many needs. So right now, our data repository is really used for our click data visualizations, but we're starting to also use it for our custom web applications so that we're not recreating the wheel and building out different models for these different purposes, but we're using our one data repository to be able to send data to these different places so that if we think back to data governance and single source of truth, we're feeding some of our systems with the same data so that they're all saying the same kind of thing. We're also using our data repository for data transfers with vendors. So this is leveraging our nice governed, well-modeled data sets to be able to quickly respond to new data requests and get data out and be able to bring data back in a repeatable way. So big picture, we're really aiming to work smarter, work more efficiently, improve our interoperability, leverage APIs across a lot of these resources, and be able to build and reuse some reusable components. And then at the bottom here, our future state is really, we're aiming to move toward improved analytics through the questions asked, through knowledge gained during these stages of our journey to eventually get to machine learning and predictive analytics. To wrap up here, I'm going to move us to our last slide. If I can find the button, here we are. So these are our essential questions and our next steps. This is a slide that we created about a year ago, and so it's fun to see it now. We're still working through a lot of these things, but we've made a lot of progress at the same time as we've promoted our work more strongly with a lot of our LCPS leadership and have really been able to make progress here to continue to grow our data management practices and our foundation. So a lot of these things on the slide, they shouldn't be new or surprising, I don't think, to anybody here, but what we've outlined here, it's time, it's resources, it's money, and it's operations. So our data science team, we're now a team of 9 people. Along with myself, we have 2 data architects, 2 data modelers, 3 data engineers, 1 business analyst, and we're hoping through these conversations and through being able to put more of this out there, we'll be able to continue to grow in the coming years. Rachel, anything else that you'd like to add to our story?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm open to hearing questions and comments and things from others. Thank you for that, though.
Great.
Wonderful. Rachel, Carrie, and Diego, thank you all so much for sharing. Hearing about Loudon's story is just so fascinating and inspiring, and the work that you've done is incredibly thoughtful and impressive. And we'd love to take some time now to open up to Q&A from our audience here today. So please, we'd like to invite everybody to ask any questions you might have in the chat. And the first question that we have is from Susan Bearden. She asked if you are self-hosting your data systems.
So we do self-host our student information system. It is in AWS Cloud Services, and we have an entire team that's dedicated internally to Loudon on another team who manages that infrastructure. But many of our other systems are either vendor-owned or vendor-managed. The analytics tool that we've purchased, Click, is a simple cloud installation. We do, Kara, correct me if I'm wrong, do we host that ourselves, or is that managed services?
It's managed services.
Okay.
We host many of our own databases here. So we are an AWS cloud shop, and then leverage vendor just managed services to host the actual tools themselves. But a lot of the data we either have access here to directly, or we're hosting ourselves the database.
And I was just thinking about our human resources data, and Diego, I think you touched on this briefly in one of your slides or in a prior discussion perhaps, but oftentimes as we conduct that self-assessment of where we are in our data management, data practices journey, it might differ, the responses might differ, the assessment scores might differ based on the domains of data that we're looking at. So we felt quite confident in our student information system data because we own it, we manage it, we conduct net 30 audits, and we have a lot of data controls and a very mature practice over the last 20 years of just ensuring that data quality and data ethics are part of the culture for data entry. On the other hand, we had some large ERP systems that we were consumers of the data. We didn't necessarily have trust or transparency in the data. And it's taken years to get to the point now where we have created data views and data models from those systems that are transferred to us on, is it a nightly basis, Kara, that we have access? Okay, yeah. So it really does depend on your analytics domains, I think, of how much trust and how much transparency and how much quality there is in that data.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head, Rachel. I mean, I think there's a maturity curve, and you could plot the entire organization somewhere along there, and it's kind of an average. But then every different organization within the larger organization has a different relationship with data, and they have different questions and different problems, and they use different systems. So it's a good idea, I think, to empower all of those different groups to take a kind of unique approach to their own challenges, just so long as all that feedback is documented in one place, so that senior leadership can look at it and appropriately assign resources where it's going to be most impactful to the organization. And if they can be transparent with that, and there's some formal process to do that, I think you'll see culture shifts from that. You'll see people kind of get more proactive about providing feedback and participating in those conversations.
And just to harken on an earlier point that Elise made about the quality of data, I would say that creating a culture where the value of the data and the quality of the data, where it's okay to say to senior leadership, this was really about your garbage in, garbage out comment earlier, at least, where senior management or the C-suite might say, well, we have all the information over here. And it's essential for whoever's representing that domain to be able to come to the table and say, we have a lot of trash, or we have low efficacy or trust. It really, you have to have that vulnerable and honest conversation when it comes to incorporating those data sets into your data management process.
And I think that's a great segue to Susan's question in the chat. She's asking if MicroStrategy has found that our customers tend to get stuck at certain phases of the data maturity journey. And I think what Rachel just mentioned, as far as being transparent and being honest about the reality of the structured data or non-structured data or lack of data in general, can be a tough conversation to have, because there's lots of different reasons for it. But what can help is, after you go through an assessment like the one we talked about today, you can at least bring to the table what the level of effort would be in order to solve that problem. And so that, I think that makes the conversation much easier to have, because you can start to think productively about how to solve the problem rather than just communicate that there is a problem.
One of the things that we've been putting into place to kind of help support that on our end, I think, have really been some of these visualizations and bringing in new sources and starting to do audits across. So one example that I know a lot of the LCPS people here today are even working on now are looking at our HR data system and data that's included there around our staff versus what we have in our student information system, and some data that we've captured there on our staff, and why are there differences, and how can we improve this interoperability between our systems so that we're all saying the same thing, and even how can we improve our processes where we're getting the right data into the source that can then feed everything else. And we're in this very interesting phase right now where we have set up so many data exchanges with staff data that are very complicated that we're now trying to map out how those currently work while we're looking at the data quality, while we're thinking about interoperability and going back and seeing where we can start to shift and improve. And just going back to this word of journey, it's just a journey where we're focused on this iterative, evolving, slow improvements, getting more people in this conversation, working together to be able to get there.
Thank you all. And yeah, and related to that, one thing I was thinking about is, Diego had mentioned the idea that everyone's voice matters. And, Rachel and Kara, you've both talked about the importance of engaging different teams. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what are some strategies that you've used for engaging teams that otherwise might not think a lot about data in these projects.
I'll go first. So it really depends on the role that they have. So you want to have a couple conversations to understand what the pain points are, and you want to have some conversation around, if you could flip a switch and in a perfect world get everything you wanted, what would that look like? And then you kind of work backward from there. So you establish where the big risks are, where the big opportunities are, and then it's a matter of educating as far as like the art of the possible. Sometimes a lot of our customers don't really know what they can ask for, and again, it ties back to having a disconnect between level of effort and value. But workshops are really, really helpful. Seeing what your counterparts at other organizations are doing can be really helpful, and fostering connections between organizations. And so we do a lot of user groups where we just try to introduce our customers, and they can talk to each other rather than us talk to them about what their challenges are. But I think the most important part is just to have the conversation, to listen and encourage them, empower people to feel like they have a right to participate in the conversation. So it's a little bit of everything, and it's probably a different answer for each organization.
I think that our establishment of this cross-functional data team was one strategy that's worked well for us. And I think that we have finally gotten past the phase of that team structure where people say, well, I'm not empowered to make that decision, or that's above my pay grade, because they know that if they're at the table, they're engaged and they've been trusted by their leadership to be participatory. So I feel like that's that's this human process dynamic that I'm never fond of, especially being kind of a technologist, but it works. It's important. It's crucial to the success. We were also able to leverage a grant from the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation for the work that we've done with the EdFi community. And I can certainly let Kara speak about how that partnership has been an inflection point for us, a lever for innovation, for moving things forward. The last thing that I would say is, as part of that grant opportunity, we also needed to tackle data literacy, because we could create all of the beautiful visualizations using trusted, governed data. But where we started to fall short was people saying, that's cool, now what? So we realized rather quickly, okay, we are lacking in some data literacy skills. And I don't think that I appreciated how important that component was. And I know that some of the assessments talk about data literacy as well. So I think that's essential to having that as part of the conversation. Kara?
The one other thing that I would add is a lot of the people that we work with on some of these apps and on this data like to say that they're not technical, right? And so they have a hard time or struggle in some of these conversations. And so we've really learned that showing them these things to help in that conversation really helps to get ideas flowing. And then also, more importantly, focusing on the questions that they're trying to answer. So instead of asking, tell us your requirements in the form of a data set or in the form of a table or even in the form of a visualization. We've spun it to tell us what you're trying to solve, tell us what your questions are, so that we can then take that back and solution and show you something to see if that's hitting the mark, and then we start to iterate on that.
And I think that really harkens back to Diego's point about ask for what is possible. In a perfect world, what would you be able to see? And that's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the barrier to significant value may be a lot lower than people think, but you never really know until you start having that conversation. It's a great idea to stand up a governance board. It sounds like that's something that's happened at LCPS, which is awesome, and that's a mark of a maturity of a mature organization for sure. And that definitely has implications in the culture, because every organization or every team has a representative that's going to go kind of champion their project, and they know that they have a voice, so that it kind of creates a different relationship with technology in the organization.
Thank you all. And yeah, I can definitely see this resonating in the chat. Lots of comments about data literacy and requirement gathering. So thank you all for sharing about that. One other question I'll address from the chat was a question about the Project Unicorn School System Data Survey and how it can help school systems on their data journey. Definitely happy to share a little bit more about that. The project we've had a lot of fun working on over the past couple of years on the Project Unicorn team. But we have used the data from the survey each year to create a state of the sector report to show really where districts across the country are in terms of pursuing data interoperability. So doing the survey has kind of a twofold benefit of, on one hand, you get to participate in this data collection that helps further the sector overall. But it also really is a tool to get insight about your own district. So we have categories of 6 different domains around data interoperability, including data governance, technology, leadership and vision, all areas that are really equally important in pursuing interoperability. But we feel that even the process of filling this out is just, we get feedback that it's really helpful to even think about those questions and see what is discussed on the survey, and that can bring up a lot of different ideas. And it can also be a really helpful collaborative activity for working with other districts, other team members in your district. And Project Unicorn also offers a customized report to every district who fills out the survey. And we are able to set up time to kind of talk through the results. So if anyone listening is interested in filling it out, we're happy to follow up with you and help share insights and go over the results and talk about next steps as well. Again, please feel free to drop more questions in the chat if anyone listening has more to ask. One other question that I wanted to ask is for Rachel and Kara. What is one piece of advice that you would give other districts who are interested in going down a similar path that Loudoun has gone down?
Kara, I will defer to you first, if that's okay.
I guess my biggest piece of advice would be to start small and build. I think in the technology world, especially as we're thinking about data management, for a long time, there's been an approach of let's figure out all of the things that we need and then build it and then we'll release it. And I know a lot of us have really started moving towards more of this agile development process of an iterative approach. And personally, I cannot stress that enough, of identifying your first step and biting off that chunk and working towards that, and just show people what you're building, get feedback, pivot where you need to, and then continue to build from there, because it really helps to get leadership buy-in that is needed for a lot of this work. I think across school districts, it's needed to be able to show the value of this. It's needed to be able to get the questions and to understand the needs so that you're building the right kind of thing. And then ultimately to make it to this stage of being able to be proactive in your data management and making sure that you do have the interoperability that you're looking for. So along with trying to set up your goals and think about where you're trying to go, that would be my biggest piece of advice, is just start small and be iterative in your cycles.
I love, Kara, how you all have adopted the minimum viable product release management process. So that's excellent. I think from my perspective, I would focus on where feasible, if your culture supports it, keep your data governance board flat. Oftentimes we tend to top load it, right, with positional authority. And what we've learned over the years is that it might be somebody 7 levels down, if you're looking at a traditional hierarchy, who has the best handle on that domain of data management and some of the challenges. So we really do practice just keeping it fluid, keeping it staffed with people who are engaged. And when we approached our C-suite team to find out who might you recommend for membership on this board, we really said, who do you go to solve some of your problems? Who do you go to when there's a sticky issue that needs to be resolved in a certain area? So it was a very non-traditional way, and it works fabulously for us.
I have one more. Sorry, can I jump in real quick? The last thing that I was just going to say is leverage the community. There are so many awesome resources out there, a lot which Elise has highlighted throughout this presentation, of people who have built really, really amazing things. And it's all out there. It's all out there for the community to be able to review, to pick up, to leverage, to use, which is a great way to be able to move a little bit faster. So again, not creating the wheel, but to be able to work with others who are doing the same kind of work and building off of what they've already created.
Well, I don't know if I can add much to that. I mean, my recommendation is listen to people who have done it and to take their advice. So we've just heard from a really successful group at Loudoun County who have they're on their journey, and they appreciate the fact that it will continue, and they have a strategy in place to continue to improve. And I think that's better than anything I can offer. The only thing I might add is I really liked how Kara kept saying iterate, and iterative. And if you don't have like a technology background, that may be a word you're not super familiar with, but it's really not one to shy away from, because it just means that you're improving and incorporating feedback and creating new versions of a solution in the effort, in the spirit of getting as much value as possible to your organization. So iterate away, and learn from the best.
All great points. Thank you all. And Diego, a follow-up question for you. I'm curious, where do you see the districts that MicroStrategy works with taking their work in the future?
We're seeing a lot of requirements to make data assets public to their communities, either on their portals or automating distribution to parents, to students, to teachers, and identifying areas of any kind of manual data analysis work and automating that with their BI solutions. And that allows them to repurpose their human time to the things that we all care about, right? Improving the student experience. So any opportunities to do that on the same platform, we're eager to help our customers do. But the data journey never ends. So we'll always have a conversation to have, along the lines of assessment, benchmarking, and prioritizing.
Thank you. And I'd also love to give our panelists some space if any of you have either, any follow-up points that you'd like to share or questions that you'd like to ask to each other following today's conversation.
I mean, the only comment that I would offer at this point is that if you don't have people in your organization who have management consulting skills, that's the perfect partnership with MicroStrategy. So we were a bit unique in Loudoun County Public Schools, as a few of us on this call came from the Big Six environment, and we're, schooled in how to do what we do, and have continued to stay plugged into that space. But in many educational institutions, the people who you might see on this call were former teachers or otherwise. So really assess what's going on in your organization, any untapped talent, and where you can leverage an organization like MicroStrategy to help you get this, lift started. Do it.
Thanks, Rachel.
Well, thank you all so much for sharing today. We've been so fortunate to have you here and to be able to learn from you and from all the great work that you've done, and very happy to be able to highlight the incredible work that you're doing. So at this point, I'm going to hand it back to Jonathan to share a few closing notes.
All right. Yes, thank you to all of our speakers today and to all of you for joining and participating in the chat and for listening in. We're so excited we were able to host this webinar today. A few final little details before we let you go. If you enjoyed this webinar and would like more information regarding future events, there's a couple of things you all can do. First, you can register for the Project Unicorn newsletter. It's free to sign up. Go to our website, projectunicorn.org. Scroll all the way to the bottom and you'll see this little box. You can put your email address in, and we will be in touch regarding future programs, resources, events from Project Unicorn and our partners. In addition, go to projectunicorn.org/events for all future webinars, conference attendances, and more. We've got a really exciting slate of events coming up for this summer and the fall, and so you won't want to miss them. projectunicorn.org/events. And finally, thank you again to everyone who attended and spoke today. We really appreciate it. We love hosting these events, and we're so excited for you to join us for the next one. Be on the lookout for follow-up email from us with the slide deck, including all the links we discussed today and a recording of the webinar. Thank you so much, and we will see you at the next one. Have a great day.